So here we are at Abbey Road in London. Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvellously well. I'm sitting here with my good friend Mr. Merrick Stiles. How are you?
Very well, thank you. You okay?
I'm good. Well, I've been here a few days, so it's been fun.
Yeah, we've been trying to plan this for a while, right? And we finally made it happen.
We did. And thanks for having us all the way out here and sunny. It is quite sunny, isn't it? Yeah.
No, it's
sunny,
cold, isn't it? It's cold.
Sunny, a little chilly London in early spring.
Yeah, yeah.
Or late winter. I don't know what you call this, but I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Hooray for us for making it happen.
Yes. And it is Abbey Road after all.
Mm.
You know, which is, I don't think there's a more famous studio in the world.
No.
Certainly no studios that have sold millions and millions of records with their name on the cover. Yes, in an album that's considered one of the top 5 greatest albums of all time. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's unique.
Yeah, that's pretty unique. I think you win the unique competition in that way. So, you hold the dubious honour. No, you hold the honour of being the guy that kind of is the liaison for the studio, meaning with companies like Chandler, who make those incredible Abbey Road recreations, with Waves and their recreations, and all of the companies that you guys work with, you're the guy that gets in there and makes it all happen. Not just like doing the deal, but you actually get in there and help with the modelling and everything. That's quite a responsibility.
Yeah, I get my hands dirty, get myself in trouble, and yeah, it's good fun. Yeah, I'm head of audio products, head of audio products. Yeah, so that allows me to kind of explore some of our historic intellectual property and do recordings, in the acoustics of our rooms, and kind of explore how we can really kind of get a bit of Abbey Road to the outside world. Not everyone can come to Abbey Road. So I think it's nice that we can, get a bit of Abbey Road to you, in the way of plugins or sampled instruments, or
the
piece of hardware.
Oh yeah, the Spitfire. The other day, I must tell you all here, I heard Spitfire Audio's Studio 1 and 2 orchestral.
Yep.
I will say 1 is absolutely amazing, but 2 floored me.
Yeah.
Because Studio 1 is an incredible sounding room that's been on every other movie you've ever heard. And it's probably a defining sound. But Studio 2 is so tight, and you instantly, of course, think of Eleanor Rigby, and you just think of that string section. And it was so individual, and what Spitfire Audio, with your help, have done is bring in all of these like idiosyncrasies that make string software, virtual strings quite usable now. I'm pretty darn impressed. One of the takeaways I got was like, just get that plugin and use your other ones and just add to it.
Yeah,
because you could go for like solo violins and just blend them in. Suddenly it adds so much realism to it.
Yeah, that project, it was almost an accident in a way. We were right in the middle of lockdown, or at the beginning of the first lockdown actually. And I mean, all our plans just went out the window. We just finished Abbey Road 1, but it was our intention to go back into the studio and sort of do some pickups and some extra patches, that sort of thing. And that all went out because we couldn't recall the orchestra, we couldn't recall the sessions. So we're like, well, what can we do? And suddenly I just thought, Eleanor Rigby, that kind of classic, kind of intimate string sound was, 8 players in the room, and we could, maybe record each of those players individually, on their own. So there's no need to have everyone in the room at the same time. It's kind of perfect for social distancing, really, just
Sure.
One musician in Studio 2, and then we sort of build up the kind of the quintet it was actually we did in the end. So 2 violins, viola, cello, and bass. So yeah, we kind of built it up like a little sort of modular kind of quintet. Perfect. And it was just like, it was a strange time, obviously, for everyone, but I think that was the first time that myself and the guys at Spitfire and the musicians had actually socialized with anyone in a way, or interacted with anyone. Suddenly we were kind of allowed to sort of work again, which was really nice. And yeah, it was great because we had the J37 tape machine and the red desk, and we used the original microphones that were used on the original sessions. So we kind of, went in deep and kind of got that kind of, original sound. We kind of did the close miking and used the echo chamber. So you know, it's about as authentic as you're going to get for that particular string sound. And yeah, I mean, you heard it. It's a really fun project. It's
ridiculously
inspiring
good.
to use. It's yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The Abbey Road one is immense.
Yeah,
It's
that's the
like
widescreen
lush,
thing.
and,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and you know, think of we're seeing all the Star Wars movies and everything that was cut there. I mean, some of the most famous string arrangements of movies were cut in that room. So,
Yeah.
and it sounds ridiculously lush. But in a way, there's a sort of idea that would be kind of easier because you're layering tons and tons and tons of violins, 80 to 100 piece orchestra. When it comes down to a quintet,
Yeah.
for it to sound that good, that takes a lot of love and care.
Yeah, and it's it's raw, it's exposed, it's kind of it's a very intimate sound. It's but having said that, it's great for all sorts. It's great for pop stuff. It's great for kind of EDM sort of rap stuff as well, and it's cool for sort of certain soundtracks, certain styles. Depends on what you're after, really. But it's that kind of raw, in your face, very close, intimate string sound.
Right.
Going through that classic gear just adds a sort of certain element and dimension to it. Yeah.
I did really love the approach notes idea, which I thought was really great, because when I'm playing a solo violin, even on the best sampler of the world, it's always it's just triggering the sound. Even if you put in a nice volume swell, it's never going to sound the same as an actual player moving from A to B. There is going to be some perceptible change of note between it, and you add that to it, it's remarkable how good it is.
Like the legato patches, we got the musicians to sort of play before and after, so that when you change the note, you actually get the before and after, the in between bit as well, so it's not so jarring, and it's
remarkable.
You just get this really smooth playback.
Yep. Fantastic. Well, let's talk about some plugins here.
Yeah.
I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. If you could take us through the Wave stuff and, of course, how it sort of pertains to the real gear itself, I think that'd be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, we started working with Waves about 10 years ago now. Yeah, and it's been a fantastic partnership. We kind of went back and sort of went through all the classics. Went to the archives, pulled out the old recall notes and the old technical notes and the schematics, and sort of blew the dust off them, and kind of got stuck in there, really. We we got the Red 17 here, we got the J37 here, we got the RS124s here, and we sort of did a greatest hits of that classic 60s Abbey Road sound that it was obviously very relevant back then, but I think it's still relevant now. I mean, it depends on what you're after, but I think there's always this need for all this desire to kind of get kind of that kind of raw, kind of gritty sound, I suppose, that kind of edgy sound, and that classic Abbey Road 60s sound is perfect for that. You got valve desks, valve tape machines, you got harsh transistorized compressors and stuff like that. It's kind of got that kind of element that I think people are looking for to sort of give that kind of poke in their music, in their mixes.
Sure.
It adds a lot of vibe to your tracks, and whether it's beats or whether it's loops or whether it's bass lines or synth or strings, it adds color. It's
as you've often heard me say, anybody watching here, is that one of the wonderful things about the modern music industry is we've got access to the best sounds in the world. And one of the worst things about the modern music industry is we have access to the best sounds in the world, because all of us can have that perfect piano or that amazingly recorded instrument. And, when we were in Studio 2 the other day, well, this morning actually, we played these pianos and we're like, it's not like they're the greatest piano ever made. It's the fact what's great about those pianos is they're not.
Yeah.
Is that they completely don't sound like anybody else's piano. And this equipment, for all its rough edges, takes these perfectly recorded, virtual instrument sounds that people have and gives it a crap ton of character.
Yeah, that's it. Character is what it's all about, I think, for me personally anyway. And I generally love using these plugins. It's especially over things that are perceived as quite digital, like synths, soft synths, that sort of thing in your DAW, things that aren't necessarily going to come out of your DAW. And they're going to stay in the digits, in the ones and zeros. So these plugins are great for sort of adding a bit of grit and a bit of character. But there's also, you know, we've done the plates, we've done the echo chambers, and
Let's pause on that for a second, because I must have missed it when I was reading or talked to Waves about it.
yeah.
But you've got a sample of Olympic in there that I didn't know existed.
Yeah, so Olympic Studios was part of so Abbey Road used to be owned by EMI, and EMI had 3 studios in London, Abbey Road, Townhouse and Olympic. Now, sadly, Townhouse and Olympic are no longer with us. I think Townhouse was the first to go, and then Olympic probably about, I don't know, 8 years ago now, maybe a little bit, yeah, about 7 or 8 years ago. And yeah, it was sad that it went, but I was given this opportunity before it went to go in there, and pretty much everything, I think everything was removed. I think the desks were still in there, but everything else had been ripped out. But obviously the rooms were still there. So I went in there with Altiverb and the Sony sampling reverb device, and the Waves impulse response software, and I just sort of pinged all the rooms. And one of those rooms was, I think it was Chenzo Townsend's stone room. He used to use it to reamp snares and things like that. And I was always fascinated by this room because I worked in Olympic a few times before. I used to go down there sometimes and help out when they, you know, were short on staff or what have you, as an assistant engineer. I used to enjoy go down there, and I was always fascinated by this stone room. It was kind of big sounding but really tight, if that makes sense. And so I basically I got to ping that, and I did close miking, mid miking, and sort of distance mic, well, as much distance as I could get in such a small room. And I sort of, you know, put the mics as high as I could or as low as I could. I got as many flavors as I could out of it, without any inclination that would ever be turned into a product or be usable in a product. I just did it just to save a piece of history, if you like. So when we did the chamber plugin with Waves, I said to the guys that, like, I've also got these impulse responses, you know, from Townhouse, from Olympic. You know, we could add that as a bonus, maybe. I mean, when we actually did the Studio 2 Echo Chamber, we you know, went to town on it and did loads of different mic positions, different speaker positions, different speakers, different types of microphones. Now, I didn't do that when I was at Olympic, because again, as I said, I didn't know it was going to end up being a product. So these are like bonus patches, if you like, in the Echo Chamber plugin.
Great sounding bonus packages.
Yeah, I love it. I love the stone room. And we also did the mirrored room that used to be in the back of Studio 3, which is very much a product of the 80s. Again, I used to love the mirrored room. It was like this kind of tiled floor with mirrored ceiling and mirrored walls. I think the idea was it was like going to be like this drum booth or something, and I don't think it got used much. I think part of the problem was why it didn't get used much is because it never got, like, it was full of stuff, basically. Like, someone put carpet in it, and then someone put some gear in it, and then, but to actually get the full effect, you actually had to remove the carpet, remove all the gear, and actually use it as an echo chamber. And I thought it sounded really cool, but unfortunately it's gone now. But again, before it went, I sampled it as much as I could, like pinged it as much as I could, because I thought it was a cool sound. Anyway, that appears in the plugin as well. So you got the Studio 2 Echo Chamber, you've got the Studio 3 mirrored room, and you've got the Olympic Studio Stone room. So, you know, it's a versatile plugin. I love it.
That's amazing. I didn't know about those other two.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that's a great plugin again for things that are very much inside the box. You know, maybe like something that's come from like soft synths or samples or something like that, or loops. You just want to add a bit of air around them. You know, you can sort of put it through the chamber plugin and sort of get the microphone closer to the speaker, and kind of, you know, it's not quite full on reverb, but it's not dry. It adds a bit of air around the source. You know, it's a useful plugin.
Wonderful. So, can you take us through some of these wonderful plugins?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can talk about these plugins till the cows come home, as it were. But yeah, let's listen to some stuff.
Marvelous.
Hi there. So as we discussed with Warren, let's dive in and check out some of the plugins and the sampled instruments we've created here at Abbey Road Studios. So the first project I really want to show you is a product I'm really proud of. We sampled a Yamaha CFX Grand Piano in Studio 1, which is our big orchestral room, and we did that with a company called Make Music, who, under the guidance of Gary Garrison, who's like a legendary sample pack creator, we made this amazing instrument that it was really interesting because I went to the engineering team here at Abbey Road and I asked them kind of what their favorite flavors were, what their favorite microphones were, what their favorite positions were, and from everything from classical to film scoring through to rock and pop. So we kind of got all these amazing flavors inside this one package. So here we can see the GUI. As you can see, it's the ultimate for me. It's this beautiful grand piano inside the kind of very widescreen acoustics of Studio One. It's just the perfect combination. So we've got close miking and ambient miking, and we've also got a lot of defaults here. So we've got this classic setup, which has got a load of presets. So everything from kind of classic rock to sort of dark cinema. Then there's the contemporary sound, which is kind of a bit more closer miking with a load of presets in there. And then we've got this player position, which is kind of quite cool. We used a dummy head microphone. So when you use headphones, you get this real kind of intimate sound, which is really good fun. So I'll give you an idea of just what the basic default setting on classic sounds like. This is a piece of music that was composed by a friend of mine, Fred Flowerday at Make Music. And it's just a good demo of what this instrument can do. So that's just the close mic, and on this setting, that's the M49 and the KM184. Great classic microphones, used a lot on pianos, especially on sort of classical sessions. I know a lot of the guys like to use the M49s. So what I'll do is I'll bring in some of the ambience as well, which is the 4006s and the TLM50s, and I'll start playing around with different blends. So to me, that's just like a gorgeous sound. I love it, absolutely love it. So there's different presets here. We can try the contemporary setting, big and bold, for example. Let's see what that sounds like. It's actually been a while since I've played around with this. So that's actually the classic AKG D19 microphone, which has been here since the 60s, a bit of a workhorse microphone, just placed above the hammers. Also with a couple of C12s that are inside underneath the lid, and then with MK2Hs out in the room. So that's a completely different timbre to that classical setting. So you've got a lot of different flavors to play with here. That's just a couple of examples. There's like 30 odd presets in this plugin. We've also got obviously things like settings where you can play around with the resonance, pedal noise, the decay times of the releases, that sort of thing. And there's also this studio tab where you can play around with the EQ. So say if you want to kind of take out some of the mid range in the room microphones, sort of clear up the sound a bit, you can do things like that. There's also some absolutely fantastic convolution reverbs. And then there's also this advanced section where you can play around with the velocity curves, so you can completely change the attack and decay of the piano. So that's the CFX of Studio One. I'm going to go on to a completely different piano sound now. So we've got two old pianos that have been here probably since the 1940s. That's the Challen piano and the Mrs. Mills piano. These were more considered songwriting pianos. They weren't particularly used for many recordings in the early days. If you're doing your recordings, you'd use your grand piano. These pianos are more sort of like songwriting pianos. But in the 60s, when bands were experimenting and looking for new sounds, these pianos were just sort of lying around, and they started being used on some very famous recordings. And to this day, we still use these pianos a lot. They're a lot of fun. I'll describe these as character pianos. So we released these with Spitfire audio. So we've got the Challen piano here. So I'm going to give you an example of what that sounds like. It's a very different beast to the beautiful lush CFX, but it's a cool sound. So yeah, not the most perfect piano in the world, but it's got a lot of character. And we've got these 3 faders here, which allows us to blend in a close pair of 67s in with some room mics, some KM84s as well, I think they were, MK2Ss at the back of the room. And then the vintage channel, which is a lot of fun, which is a D19 going through the red desk and a J37 tape machine. So you can do a lot of different blends here. So yeah, recorded in Studio 2, which is the perfect room for this sort of piano. It's the rock and roll room here at Abbey Road. And then we have Mrs. Mills's piano, which is another different beast entirely. So yeah, 3 different pianos there, entirely different characters, going from sort of lush and widescreen Studio 1, going to a bit more character driven, a bit more rock and roll in Studio 2. So we've also done a really great collaboration with Native Instruments. And the idea behind that was drums through the decades. Abbey Road opened in 1931. So the building's seen a lot of different styles of drums over the years, and we've gone right back to the birth of drums, I would say. There's a fantastic musician in London, a guy called Paul Clarvis, who's got the most amazing collection of early vintage drums. So things like snare drums going back to 1910, and then a couple of his kits are from the 30s and the 40s. So similar kits that would have been recorded in Studio 2 back in the day, people like Joe Loss and Jack Hilton, that kind of big band sort of thing. And we've gone right through to kind of modern days, I suppose, for want of a better word, where you've kind of got, you know, these beautiful drum workshop kits with going through like Neve preamps and 24-inch tape. So we try to be as authentic as possible with each decade. So, for example, on the 60s kit, we've sourced drums from the 60s and using microphones of the times that would have been used here at Abbey Road, using the Red Desk, using the J37. Same with the 70s. We've sourced all kits and cymbals from that decade to be as authentic as possible. In the 80s kits, we used the things like the Ball and Biscuit going through the SSL E series talkback compressor. So some of the tricks of the times as well. So I'm just going to play you a few examples of what these kits sound like. So this is the 60s kit. There's 2 kits in each package. So 60s there's 2 kits, 70s there's 2 kits, 80s there's 2 kits, etc. This is the Pearl Oyster, recorded in Studio 2. So we multi-mic'd these kits, which you have control of in the software. So everything from the microphone inside the kick drum right through to the room mics right at the back of Studio 2. And you can balance all those out with a little mixer section here. So you can dig in and really create your own mix, your own sound. And then you've got some really cool balancing options here. So for, say, the overhead mics or the room mics or the mono overhead mic, you can control how much of each drum is blended into those microphones. So you can really control which drums are exciting the room and which drums remain sort of dry and close and intimate, which you realistically couldn't do very easily in the real world. So you've got some really cool sound sculpting options here. Then we've got the 70s drums. We went for a tighter sound, so put a lot of carpets down and closed the kit off with some screens in Studio 2 and get that classic kind of dry in your face sort of sound. Yeah, so for 70s drums, we recorded everything through 16-track 2-inch tape, which is just kind of the ultimate for me. It's a fantastic sound. So we've got the 80s drums here, where we recorded a lot of this in Studio 3. At the time, the live room in Studio 3 was very much a product of the 80s. It was a live room designed by a guy called Sam Toyoshima, and it had very bright reflective surfaces. It also had a mirrored room, which we used to record some of the samples with, which was a lot of fun. So it's a very somewhat a product of its time, this one. There's a fantastic ball and biscuit microphone which hangs from the ceiling, which was originally designed for talkback. But if you patch that directly into the SSL E-Series talkback compressor, which is a very aggressive compressor, you get this kind of huge, kind of larger than life sound. So as you can hear, you can go pretty big and over the top with this one. It's a lot of fun. So with the modern drums, we recorded that in both Studio 3 and Studio 2, and just use some of the more kind of known modern miking styles that you might find in studios today. Things like using the reverse NS10 in the front of the kick drum. Lots of different kind of funky microphones above the kit and in the room, and kind of more, I don't know, I guess contemporary selection of cymbals like splash cymbals and China cymbals, that sort of thing. So I guess this is more of a, I don't know, a modern in-your-face sort of sound. And then for all the kits, you can dig in with various processing. So for the kick drum, snare drum, hi-hats, toms, etc., you've got EQ, you've got compression options, you've got a transient designer, which is great for impacting your attacks or sort of backing things off, or adding a bit more sustain. So that's really great for particularly snare drums and kick drums if you want to get a bit more cut or a bit more punch, or you want to back things off and round things off a bit more. And then there's a tape emulation plugin as well. So there's a lot you can do. You can really dig in and make these kits very much your own. So for the vintage drums, we obviously had these beautiful, incredible kits of the time that Paul Carvis provided and played as well. And we also used some pretty amazing microphones, actually. We used the EMI HB1E, which is a cardioid microphone from the 30s, which had a separate EQ box. And we used the RM1Bs as well, which were a ribbon microphone designed by EMI in the 40s. And then again, we went through tape, and we used the Red Desk, and things like the V72 preamps just to try and make it a sign of the times as much as possible. And unfortunately, we didn't have preamps from the 30s or 40s, but we tried our best to just kind of get that great classic kind of sound. Another great thing you can do with all of these kits, for example, if I take the kick drum here, and if I solo the kick drum, you can play around with the tuning of each of the drums. And you can play around with the attack and decay time as well. So if you mix all these options up, you can get really unique flavors. So you got, like, I don't know, snare drums from 1910 right up to sort of modern day drums. And then you can play around with the tuning. You can play around with the blend of the different microphones, room mics, overhead mono mics, stereo overhead mics, close mics, various different parts of the room. And then you've got the ability to control how much of each drum goes into those room microphones. So if you add all that together, you've got probably what I would describe as like the ultimate collection of drum samples. So we've done this great collection of plugins with Waves Audio, which I would describe as like a greatest hits of Abbey Road's vintage gear, and also some vintage techniques, everything from the Red console through to ADT. And I'm going to show you a few of the plugins here. So this is a mono drum loop I recorded in the live room at the Gatehouse here, and just a mono overhead, and then I sort of beefed it up with a kick drum sample. So here we've got the TG12345 channel strip plugin, and this was the first transistorized desk built by EMI. Installed in Abbey Road in 1962. It's just got a very unique sound, and it's also got a compressor and limiter on each channel, and they're really aggressive if you want them to be, and they the whole desk just has a very sort of great sound to it. It's very polished, but also can be quite aggressive if you want it to be. I'll just give you an example of what it sounds like without any processing first of all. Yes, as you can hear, it's got a lot more poke. I've put the compressor in. I mean, the limiter is a lot more aggressive, but the compressor is probably a bit more appropriate here. And we've got this cool feature on the compressor, which is like a blend, like a mix option. So you can blend some of the original signal in with the compressed signal. next I'm going to add the Red 17 desk. This is the Red 17 from 1958. Still here at Abbey Road, still gets used a lot. And I think it was Ken Scott who told me that for the old Red desks, they would just literally crank the high tone and low tone up to full, and you kind of just get this kind of really vibey sound. It's a great sort of character plugin. So I'm going to add this into the mix as well with the TG plugin, and we can hear what those two sound like together. So I absolutely love that. I love that sound. I love that vibe. And I mean, back in the day, there probably wouldn't have been many situations, probably none at all actually, where you could blend the sound of the Red desk and the sound of the TG desk together. For me, it's like a great combination. I'm also now going to blend in a microphone that I think has been massively misunderstood over the years, and probably for good reason. It is a bit of a funky plugin. So EMI used to make these beautiful grand microphones for the royal family in the 30s and the 40s for when they were doing speeches and appearing at events, that sort of thing. They're really unusual microphones. One of them is a carbon granule microphone, which I don't think I've ever seen one before, and I don't think I've seen one since. And there's also two dynamic microphones, but they've just, all three of them, they've got this very antiquated sound, as you might expect. It was the chief engineer here at the time, a guy called Peter Cobbin, who was in the EMI archives, and he found these microphones and probably didn't think much more of them until he was asked to record the score for the King's Speech. So we got the mics delivered from archives, and Pete actually sort of set them up in a decatree in front of the orchestra, and got this incredible sort of antiquated sound, which was used, some of which was used in the film. And then we had them around for a few weeks, and we started experimenting with putting things like synths through them, like reamping synths and reamping guitars, and they just have this beautiful kind of character, which is great for adding a bit of grit and a bit of poke to your recordings, if you like. And I think it's great on drum loops especially. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend some of this plugin into that loop I've just played, and then play around with some of the options just to give you an idea of what you can get through this plugin. So the Red plugin is great for inserting over multiple tracks. So say you've got a load of synthesizers, and those synthesizers have stayed inside the box, they've come from a soft synth. If you insert a a load of red plugins over each track, you can add a lot more depth and character to those synthesizers, particularly if they're stereo. So for the red desk, we modeled 2 channel strips. So if you insert the plugin over a stereo synth, and on the left you have channel 1, on the right you have channel 2, you kind of have this sort of extra dimension to the sound. It's subtle, but when you start adding it up to multiple tracks, you do get a sound that's kind of got a bit more depth to it overall. So when you start adding them up and stacking them up, you end up with a sound that's just got a lot more depth to it, and I'll give you an example of that. So I've added an instance of the red plugin over all of these synth tracks. I've done the classic kind of 60s production style thing of just whacking up the tone high and the tone low. That might be a bit extreme in most circumstances. You may have to back things off a bit. And I've done that thing where on the left and the right, I've set some to channel 1, some to channel 2, and I've added a little bit of gain on each of these channels as well. So when you hear them all play back together, I'll play the track with all the plugins on insert, and then I'll insert the red plugins, and you'll hear the difference in sound. And like I say, yeah, you get that real sense of depth and liveliness and vibe out of your soft synth tracks. So yeah, as you can hear, it just adds a ton of character, a lot of vibe, and I just think it's a really fun plugin for just adding a bit more depth to your overall tracks. So here's another really simple drum recording. It's just a mono overhead with a kick mic and a snare mic. I can't remember which room this was recorded in, but just with these 3 tracks, I'm going to insert the TG plugin just so you can get an idea of how much this channel strip can really just sort of add a lot of vibe and kind of, I guess, a bit more of a kind of punch to your drum tracks. For that kind of, I don't know, I guess it's like quite a vintage sound, but it's still very relevant to today. It does sort of just bring things to life. It's I don't know, it sounds simple, but that's kind of what this TG sound can do. So I'll play you the drum recording with the TG plugin on bypass, and I'll insert them. So yeah, it just feels a lot more in your face, feels a lot more exciting. This is just on the compression setting as well. So on the overhead here, I'll give you an example of what the limiter can do. So yeah, I love this plugin for obvious reasons, especially on drums. So another thing I want to talk about is this new concept that's come out from Waves, which I think is really innovative. It's called Studioverse, and what it allows you to do effectively is create your own plugin chains where you can link up various controls from various plugins to one another and create your own sound effectively, and save that and share that with other people. So to me, it reminds me of the gaming industry. So you've got game engines like Unity and Unreal Engine, which a lot of people use to make games that are available commercially, right through to people just making their own games or their own experiences, people experimenting, that sort of thing. And with those engines, you've kind of got professionals who kind of make their own graphics. They code their own. They create animations. They effectively, build the game from the ground up. And then you've got other types of users who use Unity and Unreal who can't necessarily code or aren't necessarily graphic designers, but they still want to be creative. And there's these communities within these gaming worlds there where people do create assets that they share. So you can go onto Unity, you can go onto Unreal, and you can download pre-codes, you can download pre-animations, you can download beautiful graphics of everything from a house through to a guitar through to a sword, anything you can think of. Someone's probably made it, and you can download these things, and you can still be creative. You can still create gaming worlds even though you aren't a programmer or a coder or a graphic designer. So when I think of Studioverse, it kind of reminds me of the similar sort of thing. You've got people who obviously make plugins, and they're coders, and they have graphic designers, and they can make these beautiful, incredible recreations of classic gear or entirely new plugins. And then what I think Studioverse allows you to do is become almost like the equivalent of a game designer who's using pre-made assets. You're using these pre-made plugins to make your own plugin stacks, your own plugin chains. You can use macros to access your favorite parts of plugins. So you can build like a greatest hit chain set, if you like, of your favorite plugins, and your favorite parts of those plugins you can link up and create your own sound and give it a name. You can name all the different parameters. You can set the variance of the parameters, and then you can either save that chain, that preset, if you like, as your own private chain. So that's your tool of resources you can dive into when you like, or you can share those chains to everyone on the Studioverse. So it's kind of like this creative community of people sharing different chains, and I love it. I think it's a lot of good fun. Once you start digging in and creating your own chains and giving them names and saving them, I think it's a very creative outlet for people who kind of are interested in sculpting their own sounds, saving their own sounds, but aren't plugin designers by default. Hopefully, further down the line, Waves will allow you to add graphic elements, so then you can really make these plugin chains your own. But I'm just going to give you an example of some of the chains I've created, just to give you an idea of what you can do. So this is the plugin chain I've created called Abbey Road Kick Drum, and it's designed really to sculpt a kick drum where you've been given a recording, or you've done a recording, you're listening back to it, and it's just not particularly inspiring you. So you want to add a bit of vibe to it, a bit of attack to it, change the decay. scoop out some of the mud, add a bit of punch, add a bit of low end thud, that sort of thing. And also there's a gate option, so you can remove some of the bleed if there's some bleed in your kick drum. So it's some of the tools I would use and some of the techniques I would use just to get a bit more out of a kick drum recording in the mixing situation. So I'm just going to give you an example of what the kick drum sounds like without the Studioverse plugin inserted. So there's nothing, it's a fine recording, but I just want to add a bit more attack to it. I want to remove some of that bleed that's going on in between the hits, and just get a bit more life breathing into it. So this is my Studioverse plugin for kick drum, and what it is, it's the Red 17 desk. Then we've got a transient designer here. We've got a compressor gate. We've got the TG mastering chain. And we've got the RS124 plugin. And then I've got various controls here on the left-hand side, such as Vibe, which is pretty much just me linking up the tone controls on the red desk. Going back to that thing that Ken Scott told me, that they were quite often just whack the high tone up, whack the low tone up, and it would just create this kind of instant vibe to the recording in the control room, and people loved it. So I've done the thing here called Vibe, and I've just attached this macro to those controls. So let's back that off a bit. So let's hear a before and after. Yes, some of the other parameters I've done. So, for example, the thud here is bringing up the mix control on the RS124, which can be quite an aggressive compressor. So it's just adding that kind of punch back into the kick drum sound. And then we've got the TG mastering chain, which is allowing me to add that scoop. So I usually find around 500 hertz. You can get quite a lot of muddiness in the kick drum. So if you kind of remove that frequency a bit and reduce it, it gives you a bit more clarity in the kick drum. So you can see here, I've just called this scoop, for want of a better word, and I've got that reducing this kind of 500 hertz region on the TG mastering plugin. So yeah, that's how it works basically. You create these macros, you link the macros to various components in the plugin, and once you add that all together, you've got quite a unique chain that's very much yours, or you can share it with other users. And then I've done a similar plugin for the snare drum. So yeah, similar thing. I've just chained up a lot of plugins I love to use to get a bit more life and depth and soul out of a kick drum, or to clean things up a bit with gates to get a bit more punch. And I'll give you a before and after here. It's a similar thing to the kick drum, similar chain, but slightly different parameters. Very different, as you can hear. A lot more clarity, a lot more punch. It just sounds more satisfying. I think that kick and that new snare will just blend better in with the overall drum sound with the other microphones, and you'll just get a lot more punch through the mix from the kick and the snare. I'll give you an example of those two together, before and after, so you can get the overall effect. So on the other end of the spectrum from kick and snare, I've also created a chain in Studioverse, which is what I've called Mix Master Vibes. It's not a mastering plugin, it's just a plugin of plugins. It's just a chain of plugins that I like to put over my mix master, just to add a bit of glue to the mix, a bit of excitement to the mix, a bit of clarity to the mix. I have included a loudness option in case you're just running out a rough mix that you need to send to someone, but I would completely turn that loudness off if this was going to a mastering engineer. So this chain comprises of the Abbey Road TG mastering chain, which I've used for various EQ functions and compression functions. The Red 17, because I love it on channel 1 and channel 2, with the amazing sounding EQ. It's just like the vibe part. The J37 just creates this tape glue on a mix, which is absolutely like fantastic. I love using the J37 over a mix. There's this plugin here, which is the Abbey Road Saturator, which could be quite extreme to put over your mix, but it is fun if you need to add some sort of air, some sort of hype, excitement to your overall mix, but I would use that sort of quite cautiously. And there's also the Abbey Road Vinyl, which again is something I would probably turn off if I was sending it to a mastering engineer. But if you're sending out a rough mix, for example, I would usually add it because it I don't know, it just adds a bit of character, that vinyl character, to your overall sound. So when you mix all those together, you've kind of got a mastering chain, the mastering desk. You've got the red desk with the J37, and then things like the saturator if you need it to add some hype, and then the vinyl. You sort of add those flavors together, and you've got quite a powerful kind of overall mix sculpting tool. Hopefully you can hear that difference. It's sort of light and day for me. It adds a lot more depth to the mix. That's the kind of the J37 doing its magic, I think, with obviously some of the EQ settings I've added. The saturation is adding kind of like a nice sort of hype, although it's quite low there, and you've got to be careful with it. You can see the exciter there. That's actually blending in the mix option there on the exciter. So yeah, you have to be quite careful with that one. Yeah, the punch is coming from the TG mastering compressor. You can see that mix option happening there. We've got low energy, which is that kind of classic 64 Hertz kind of thing, which, you know, is a good frequency for adding a bit of depth, a bit of low end oomph. And then the scoop again is that thing of just scooping out some of the frequencies around the mid range, so sort of 500 Hertz, lower mids, which does make a big difference, I find, on overall mixes as well. So another great thing about Studioverse is if you loaded up someone's chain and you don't want to use all the elements, you can easily just turn some of this stuff off. So, if you don't want the vinyl, you can just turn it off. If you don't want the loudness maximizer, you can just turn that off. If you don't want the tape, you can turn that off as well. So you don't have to use the whole chain. So hopefully that gives you a better idea of some of the products we've created here at Abbey Road Studios with our amazing partners, Make Music, Native Instruments, Spitfire Audio, and Waves. And these plugins are really allowing, I guess, a lot of people who necessarily can't come to Abbey Road, we're kind of bringing the Abbey Road sound to you. Having said that, a lot of our clients use these plugins as well, so they're not kind of exclusive to anyone. And I'm really proud of these plugins. I'm really proud of what they can enable people at home to do with their productions, and how they allow people to be really creative with that Abbey Road sonic fingerprint, if you like. And I hope you enjoyed this video.
Thank you ever so much. That was marvellous.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming here. Thanks for coming over, flying over. It's quite a distance for you, right? It's not just around the corner.
Well, it's a leave one day, arrive the next.
Yeah. So thank you for enduring the jet lag.
Yes, it's all rather wonderful to be here. Thanks, everyone. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, ciao, goodbye. Tout soon.